January 14th, 1945. Alsace-Lorraine region, northeastern France. Temperature 3 degrees below freezing. The German observation post sat elevated on a limestone ridge overlooking the Moder River Valley. Obergefreiter Klaus Reimann pressed field glasses against his frost-burned face, scanning the American positions 2 kilometers southwest. Behind him, 3 additional spotters huddled around a field telephone, breath visible in pale clouds. For 6 days, they had been attempting to locate American artillery batteries that were systematically dismantling German defensive positions across the valley floor. The pattern repeated with mechanical precision. Every morning at 06:20 hours, American shells landed on German machine gun nests. By 06:35, the fire ceased. German counter-battery teams triangulated firing positions, radioed coordinates to their own artillery, and launched retaliatory barrages within 12 minutes. They struck nothing. When German reconnaissance patrols reached the calculated positions, they found empty fields, frozen mud, tire tracks leading in multiple directions, no craters from counterfire, no equipment fragments, no abandoned shell casings beyond the standard scatter pattern of a few rounds. It was as if the American guns fired, then vanished into the winter fog. Reimann lowered his binoculars. His hands shook, not from cold, but from exhaustion. 6 nights without sleep, 6 days watching coordinates that yielded nothing. The Americans were not using conventional static positions. They were not even using the typical displacement tactics German forces recognized from North Africa or Italy. This was something else entirely. Behind the ridge, German artillery commander Major Ernst Vogel stood beside a half-track, studying a map covered in red pencil marks. Each mark represented a calculated American firing position, 17 in total. His batteries had shelled 14 of them, 0 confirmed hits. Vogel's jaw tightened. He had commanded artillery battalions since 1940. He understood counter-battery doctrine. He knew the mathematics of shell trajectory, the acoustic science of sound ranging, the geometry of flash spotting. He had destroyed Soviet artillery regiments on the Eastern Front using these exact methods. Yet here, in France, against the Americans, every principle failed. "They are not where they should be," Vogel muttered to his executive officer. "They fire, and then they are gone. It defies operational logic." The executive officer said nothing. There was nothing to say. At 06:18 hours, Reimann heard it again. The distant low rumble that preceded incoming fire, not the scream of rockets, not the whistle of mortars, the deep, rolling thunder of heavy artillery. "Incoming!" he shouted. The first shell impacted 400 meters behind the ridge. The second destroyed a supply truck. The third landed directly on a German 105mm howitzer position, silencing it instantly. 14 shells total, all within 90 seconds. Then silence. Reimann grabbed the field telephone. Battery position southwest, approximate bearing 260, range 2,000 meters, requesting immediate counterfire. German guns answered within 8 minutes. Shells saturated the suspected area, trees splintered, earth fountained upward, smoke blanketed the coordinates. When the barrage ended, Vogel dispatched a reconnaissance squad. They returned 2 hours later, empty field. Tire ruts in the mud, already hardening in the cold. Shell casings scattered in a pattern suggesting no more than 6 rounds fired from that location. The rest of the incoming barrage had originated elsewhere. "They are not remaining static," the squad leader reported. "They fire, displace, and vanish within minutes." Vogel folded the map slowly. He had read intelligence reports about American mechanized artillery tactics, but reading and witnessing were not the same. The Americans were not simply mobile. They were executing a doctrine of speed and deception that rendered traditional counter-battery fire almost useless. Somewhere in the valley, American crews were firing, moving, and surviving, and the Germans could not stop them. 3 kilometers west, in a forest clearing concealed beneath camouflage netting, Staff Sergeant Raymond Kowalski stood beside an M7 Priest self-propelled howitzer. The 105mm gun barrel still radiated heat from the morning fire mission. Around him, 5 additional Priests idled in staggered positions, engines running low. Kowalski checked his wristwatch. 4 minutes since the last round fired. Time to move. "Mount up!" he called. Crews scrambled into their vehicles. No hesitation, no wasted motion. This was the 8th displacement since dawn 3 days prior. The routine had become instinctive. The M7 Priest was not a traditional towed howitzer. It was a self-propelled gun mounted on a modified M3 tank chassis. It carried a 105mm howitzer, a crew of 7 none, and enough ammunition for sustained fire missions. But its greatest advantage was not firepower, it was speed. From firing position to road march, the Priest could displace in under 5 minutes. Towed howitzers required 15 to 20 minutes to limber, hitch, and withdraw. That difference was survival. American artillery doctrine in early 1945 emphasized 3 principles: shoot, move, communicate. The concept was simple: fire a mission, displace immediately, establish communication with forward observers, repeat. Never remain static long enough for enemy counter-battery fire to find you. German doctrine still relied on prepared positions, sustained barrages, and defensive depth. It worked against slower opponents. Against mechanized American units executing rapid displacement tactics, it was obsolete. Kowalski's battery, part of the 987th Field Artillery Battalion, had been operating under this mobile doctrine since December 1944. They moved an average of 6 times per day. They never fired more than 12 rounds from a single position. They communicated via radio, not field telephone, allowing coordination without physical wire lines that could be traced. The result was the artillery unit that appeared, struck, and disappeared before the enemy could respond effectively. But the tactic carried costs. Crew exhaustion was constant. Maintenance crews worked around the clock, repairing tracks, engines, and recoil mechanisms, stressed by continuous movement. Ammunition resupply became a logistical puzzle, requiring trucks to locate and rendezvous with batteries that relocated every few hours. Sleep became a luxury measured in 30-minute intervals. Kowalski's Priest, designated Hellfire 3, rolled out of the clearing at 06:42 hours. The convoy moved in single file through narrow forest trails, avoiding main roads where German observation aircraft might spot them. They traveled 2 kilometers northeast, entering a secondary position pre-scouted by reconnaissance teams the previous night. By 06:58 hours, all 6 Priests were in position, guns oriented southwest toward known German concentrations. The radio crackled. "Hellfire Battery, this is Overwatch 2, fire mission, target enemy infantry in tree line, grid 472831, range 3,000 meters, deflection, left 20, 6 rounds, high explosive, fire when ready." Kowalski relayed coordinates to his gunner. The crew moved with mechanical efficiency. Powder charges loaded, shells seated, elevation adjusted. "Fire!" The howitzer roared, recoil absorbed by the vehicle's suspension. Shell away, reload, fire, reload, fire. 6 rounds in 90 seconds. "Rounds complete," Kowalski reported. "Splash, good effect," the forward observer confirmed. Secondary explosions observed. Enemy position neutralized. Kowalski did not celebrate. There was no time. "Prepare to displace." 4 minutes later, Hellfire Battery was moving again. In the German observation post, Reimann heard the American guns. He triangulated the sound, calculated approximate distance, and radioed coordinates. German artillery responded 8 minutes later, pounding the forest position. By then, the Americans were gone. The cycle repeated throughout the day. Fire, move, fire, move. The Germans expended hundreds of shells trying to silence an enemy they could not pin down. American losses remained minimal. German positions continued to erode. At 1840 hours, as winter darkness settled over Alsace, Kowalski's battery established a night position in an abandoned farm complex. Crews dismounted, performing maintenance by flashlight. Hot rations arrived via supply truck. Men ate standing, too tired to sit. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the battery's forward observer liaison, approached Kowalski with a map. Yard Division intelligence reports German artillery commanders are calling us Geistergeschütze, ghost guns. Kowalski smirked faintly. Good, let them think we're ghosts. Keeps them guessing. They're not just guessing anymore, Hale continued. Prisoner interrogations indicate they're revising counter-battery doctrine specifically to counter our mobility. They're setting up multiple observation posts, trying to predict our displacement routes. Then we change routes, Kowalski replied. We stay unpredictable. That's the doctrine. Hale nodded. Division wants us to maintain this tempo through the next phase. 7th Army is preparing a push toward the Rhine. We're the anvil. Keep the Germans pinned, keep them guessing, keep them from massing for counterattacks. Kowalski looked at his men. Faces streaked with oil and mud. Eyes red from exhaustion. Hands trembling as they loaded ammunition. They were operating beyond normal human endurance. But they were alive, and the Germans could not touch them. January 21st, 1945. Forward Command Post, 987th Field Artillery Battalion. Lieutenant Colonel William Draper stood before a terrain map, studying red and blue markings that represented enemy and friendly positions. Behind him, 3 battalion officers waited in silence. Gentlemen, Draper began, Division has identified a high-value target, German artillery park, approximately 8 kilometers east of our current area. Intelligence estimates 12 to 15 guns, including heavy 150mm pieces. They've been hammering our infantry for the past 72 hours. He tapped the map. Problem, it's deep, beyond our normal range unless we displace forward into contested terrain. Risk of encirclement is significant. Risk of counter-battery is even higher. Major Paul Reichert, the battalion executive officer, leaned forward. What's the proposed solution? Raid doctrine, Draper replied. We push 2 batteries forward under cover of darkness. Establish concealed positions within 4 kilometers of the target. Fire maximum rate for 3 minutes. Displace immediately. Hit them before they know we're there. Silence filled the tent. Raid doctrine was not standard American artillery procedure. It borrowed from cavalry tactics. Strike fast, strike hard, withdraw before the enemy responds. It required precise timing, perfect coordination, and absolute trust in mobility. It also meant operating far beyond friendly infantry support. If we get spotted during displacement, Reichert said carefully, we're isolated. No covering force, no fallback positions. Correct? Draper acknowledged. But if we succeed, we eliminate their heaviest guns. We degrade their ability to support any counter-offensive, and we prove that mobility wins. Kowalski, present as a senior battery commander, spoke, Sir, my crews can execute this. We've been running displacement drills since December. 4-minute turnaround is standard now. We can fire, pull out, and be gone before their counter-battery radar even triangulates us. Draper met his eyes. You're certain? Yes, sir. Then you'll lead Hellfire Battery on this mission. Captain Green will lead Thunder Battery as your support element. Total commitment, 12 priests, full ammunition load. You'll displace at 0200 hours tomorrow. Reconnaissance teams are scouting routes now. Fire mission at 0430. Extraction by 0435. Questions? None. Then prepare your men. The following night, Kowalski's convoy moved through frozen darkness. No headlights. Drivers navigated by moonlight and memorized terrain features. The temperature dropped to -8°C. Ice formed on gun barrels and vision blocks. They traveled 10 kilometers through forest trails and farm roads, avoiding all known German patrol routes. At 03:45 hours, they reached the designated firing position, a shallow valley 3.8 kilometers from the German artillery park. The priests dispersed into pre-assigned positions. Crews worked in near silence, voices low, movements efficient. Gun crews loaded high-explosive shells. Drivers kept engines idling, ready for immediate departure. Kowalski coordinated with forward observers positioned on a hillside overlooking the German guns. Radio communication only. No flares, no tracers. Complete operational silence until the mission commenced. At 04:28 hours, the forward observer whispered into his radio, "Hellfire, Overwatch 6. Target confirmed. Multiple guns visible. Crew activity observed. You are cleared hot." Kowalski glanced at his watch. 2 minutes. He looked at his gunner, Corporal Ben Fisher. The young man's hands were steady on the controls. "On my mark," Kowalski said. 04:30 hours. "Fire!" 12 howitzers erupted simultaneously. The valley exploded with sound and flame. Shells arced through the night sky, tracers marking their paths. The first salvo landed directly on the German artillery park. Explosions blossomed orange against the darkness. Kowalski's crew fired with practiced rhythm. Load, fire, load, fire. Maximum rate of fire, 4 rounds per minute. Sustained for 3 minutes. 48 shells per gun. 576 shells total. The German artillery park became an inferno. Ammunition stores detonated. Howitzers flipped from their emplacements. Trucks exploded. Crews scattered in panic, unable to mount organized resistance. At 04:33 hours, Kowalski shouted, "Cease fire! Prepare to displace!" Guns fell silent. Engines roared. The priests wheeled in coordinated motion, pulling out of firing positions in staggered sequence. Within 4 minutes, the entire battery was moving. Behind them, the German artillery park burned. At 04:41 hours, German counter-battery fire began landing on the valley. Shells cratered empty ground. Smoke and frozen earth. No targets. The Americans were already 3 kilometers away, moving northeast toward friendly lines. At 05:20 hours, Hellfire and Thunder batteries crossed back into secure territory. No casualties, no mechanical failures. Mission accomplished. In the German command post, Major Vogel received reports of the attack. 12 guns destroyed or damaged, 17 crew members killed, ammunition stockpile lost, and the American artillery had vanished before his forces could respond. He sat down heavily, staring at the map. "Geistergeschütze," he murmured. Ghost guns indeed. January 28, 1945. German High Command, Strasbourg Sector. General Major Otto Kraus reviewed reconnaissance photographs spread across a field table. Aerial images captured by Luftwaffe observers showed muddy trails, scattered shell casings, and tire tracks throughout the Alsace countryside. No American artillery visible. "They are never where we expect them," Kraus said to his intelligence officer, Hauptmann Dieter Scholz. "Every calculated position is empty when our shells arrive. Every interception attempt fails. Explain this." Scholz pointed to a series of annotated maps. "The Americans are employing a mobile fire and maneuver doctrine we have not encountered at this scale. Their self-propelled guns allow displacement in under 5 minutes. They communicate via radio, coordinate with forward observers, and operate in decentralized battery elements. We have mobile guns," Kraus countered. "Wespe, Hummel, our assault guns. Why can we not replicate this? Fuel, sir, and operational philosophy. Our doctrine emphasizes prepared positions and sustained barrages. The Americans prioritize speed over volume. They fire brief missions and withdraw immediately. It sacrifices sustained suppression, but it ensures survival. Krauss folded his arms. Then we adapt. Deploy roving hunter teams, motorcycle reconnaissance, light armor, infantry support. When we identify American firing positions, we pursue immediately. Force them to fight or abandon their guns. Schultz hesitated. Sir, the Americans have air superiority. Any daylight pursuit will be vulnerable to fighter-bomber attack. Then we pursue at night, Krauss snapped. We cannot allow them to operate with impunity. If we cannot destroy their guns with artillery, we destroy them with maneuver. The new German tactic deployed 3 days later. Mobile hunter teams, consisting of motorcycle scouts, armored cars, and mounted infantry, patrolled contested zones. When American artillery fired, German teams moved aggressively toward the Sound, attempting to engage before the Americans displaced. It was a desperate adaptation, a doctrine improvised under pressure, and it carried severe risks. On the night of February 2nd, Kowalski's battery executed a fire mission against German troop concentrations near the town of Haguenau, 6 rounds per gun, standard procedure. Displacement initiated immediately after the last shell fired. But this time, German hunters were waiting. A motorcycle reconnaissance team, positioned 2 kilometers east, heard the American guns. They accelerated toward the Sound, reporting coordinates via radio. Behind them, 2 SDKF Z-250 armored half-tracks carrying infantry squads followed at maximum speed. Kowalski's convoy was moving through a narrow forest trail when the lead priest's driver spotted headlights approaching from the east. "Contact! Vehicles closing fast!" Kowalski grabbed the radio. "All units! Enemy contact! East side! Maintain displacement! Do not stop!" Rear guard. Suppress targets. The trailing priests rotated turrets, lowering gun barrels to direct fire angles. The M7 Priest's 105mm howitzer could fire horizontally in emergencies, functioning as an improvised anti-tank gun. The German motorcycles entered the clearing first. A single high-explosive shell detonated 20 meters in front of them. The blast threw men and machines sideways, shredding tires and snapping metal. The half-tracks halted, infantry dismounting. Small arms fire crackled through the trees. Tracers streaked orange in the darkness. Kowalski's convoy accelerated. No time for sustained engagement. Survival depended on movement. 2 priests fired smoke shells, blanketing the trail in white phosphorus haze. The convoy plunged through, engines roaring. Behind them, German infantry pursued on foot, firing blind into the smoke. Bullets ricocheted off armored hulls. One priest took hits to its rear stowage, shredding camouflage netting but causing no critical damage. By the time the smoke cleared, the Americans were gone. The German hunter team radioed their report. Contact made. Enemy convoy engaged, unable to prevent escape. Krauss received the report with bitter frustration. Even direct pursuit failed. The Americans were too fast, too coordinated, too willing to sacrifice sustained firepower for mobility. Over the following weeks, similar engagements occurred across the sector. German hunters made contact 11 times. In every instance, American batteries escaped with minimal losses. The tactical equation remained unchanged. The Americans fired. The Americans moved. The Germans arrived too late. At a captured German command post, American intelligence officers interrogated a captured artillery lieutenant. He spoke freely, exhausted and disillusioned. "We called them Geistergeschütze," he said. "Ghost guns. We could hear them. We could see the shells land, but we could never find them. It was like fighting shadows." The interrogator took notes. "Did your forces develop effective countermeasures?" The lieutenant laughed bitterly. "Countermeasures? We tried everything. Roving patrols, predictive positioning, night pursuits. Nothing worked. Your guns moved faster than we could react. Your doctrine rendered our artillery impotent. Why do you think that is?" The lieutenant met his eyes. "Because you built your doctrine around machines, not positions. We built ours around positions, not machines. In mobile warfare you win. It is that simple." The report reached 7th Army headquarters 3 days later. Analysts studied the findings, compared them with operational data, and reached a conclusion that would shape artillery doctrine for decades. Mobility was not merely an advantage, it was survival. March 15, 1945, Rhine River crossing operations. The 987th Field Artillery Battalion positioned along the western bank, providing fire support for infantry assaults across the river. German resistance remained fierce, but the pattern was clear. American forces advanced. German forces withdrew. Kowalski stood beside Hellfire 3, watching smoke rise from the eastern shore. His hands were steady now. The exhaustion had become permanent, a baseline condition rather than a temporary burden. "Sir," Corporal Fischer said quietly. "How much longer?" Kowalski glanced at him. The young gunner looked 10 years older than when the battalion deployed in December. They all did. "Until it's done," Kowalski replied. The mobile artillery doctrine they had executed for 3 months was no longer experimental. It was standard. Other battalions across 7th Army adopted the tactics: shoot, move, communicate, never static, never predictable. German counter-battery effectiveness collapsed. American artillery losses dropped by 60% compared to static operations in Italy and North Africa. The doctrine proved its worth in blood not spilled, in guns not destroyed, in crews who survived. But survival came at a price measured in more than casualties. Men aged rapidly under the constant displacement cycle. Mechanical failure rates increased. Logistics became a perpetual challenge. The doctrine demanded everything from everyone, every hour of every day. Yet it worked. On March 24th, elements of the 987th crossed the Rhine, continuing their mobile fire support into Germany itself. The ghost guns that haunted German positions in Alsace now ranged across the German heartland. Kowalski kept a small notebook, recording displacement positions and fire missions. By war's end, his battery executed over 400 fire missions from more than 200 distinct positions. Average time per position, 43 minutes. They never lost a gun to counter-battery fire. After Germany's surrender, the 987th Field Artillery Battalion deactivated at a staging area near Munich. Crews dismounted for the last time, walking away from machines that had kept them alive through 3 months of continuous operations. No parades celebrated their innovation. No headlines proclaimed the ghost guns. Operational reports documented the mobile doctrine in technical language, stripped of drama, focused on numbers and tactical outcomes. Staff Sergeant Raymond Kowalski returned to Pittsburgh in August 1945. He worked as a machinist, married, raised 2 children, and never spoke publicly about the war. When veterans gathered, he listened more than he talked. In 1968, a military historian researching mechanized artillery tactics contacted him for an interview. Kowalski agreed reluctantly. "Did you realize, at the time, that you were pioneering a new doctrine?" the historian asked. Kowalski considered the question carefully. "We realized we wanted to survive. The doctrine followed from that. We had machines that could move, so we moved. The Germans had machines too, but they didn't move them the same way. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they didn't believe in it. I don't know." "Do you think your tactics influenced post-war artillery development?" "I don't think about it," Kowalski replied. "We did what we were told to do. We did it well. We came home. That's all." But the doctrine endured. Post-war American artillery training emphasized mobility, rapid displacement, and decentralized operations. Self-propelled howitzers became standard. The shoot-and-scoot tactic, refined in the forests of Alsace, became foundational to modern artillery warfare. Soviet forces observed American mobile doctrine during joint operations in 1945. They incorporated similar principles into their own mechanized artillery units, creating the basis for Cold War-era rocket artillery tactics. Israeli forces adopted shoot-and-scoot doctrine in the 1960s, using it decisively during the Six-Day War. NATO standardized mobile artillery operations throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The ghost guns of Alsace became doctrine, then tradition, then assumption. Future generations of artillerymen learned to fire and move without knowing the frozen forests where the tactic was proven, without hearing the German voices that called them Geistergeschütze. In 2003, a declassified after-action report from the 987th Field Artillery Battalion was archived at the UIKEST Army Heritage and Education Center. The document, 73 pages long, detailed every fire mission, displacement, and engagement from January through March 1945. One paragraph, buried on page 47, summarized the operational outcome. Battalion executed mobile fire support doctrine with unprecedented success. Counter-battery losses reduced to near zero. Enemy artillery effectiveness degraded by estimated 70% in assigned sector. Mobility proved decisive tactical advantage. Recommend adoption as standard operational procedure for future mechanized artillery units. The report was signed by Lieutenant Colonel William Draper. Filed, forgotten. But the lesson lived. In every modern artillery battery that fires and moves, in every crew that survives because they refuse to remain static, in every doctrine that prioritizes speed over position, the ghost guns endure, not as legend, not as myth, as principle. Raymond Kowalski died in 1991, aged 71. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II in a single line, no details, no decorations listed, just the simple acknowledgement, veteran. His notebook, containing records of 200 displacement positions, was donated to a local historical society. It remains in storage, uncatalogued, unread. The guns he commanded were scrapped decades ago, melted down, repurposed into civilian steel. But the doctrine survives. Somewhere, tonight, an artillery crew fires a mission and displaces within minutes, moving before the enemy can respond. They do not know Raymond Kowalski's name. They do not know the forests of Alsace or the frozen nights of January 1945. They simply know the doctrine works. Shoot, move, survive. The ghost guns taught them that, and history, unconcerned with memory, continues forward.